Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my corner of the internet. My name is Jason, and today I'm going to be taking a glance at Mighty Number 9. Now, Mighty Number 9 is a result of a Kickstarter project funded by, by the backers, but it was started by Keiji Inafune, the original creator from the Mega Man series. And he wanted to create a spiritual successor to Mega Man. And his idea was Mighty Number 9, and it actually just came out to actually some fairly, we'll say, critical views. And I figured that I would go ahead and chime on in, now that I've had a little bit of time to actually play the game. Now, I'm going to give you, we'll say a too long didn't watch sort of conclusion right now, but then we'll go into some detail here as I show off the game. Now, my thoughts, the game's decent. It's shy of good, it's definitely not great, but it's not bad. And I think that because a lot of the drama and the emotion behind the Kickstarter, it's colored a lot of people's views, and it's getting crapped on a lot harder than it really deserves. However, there are some major problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm not, we'll say, just blindly defending this game. It has some major problems. So let's go ahead and we'll just start the game off. We'll start playing it a little bit, and then I'll talk about it as we play. I do want to take a look at the options, but we're going to play the intro stage first. So we're going to skip over, I already have a save here that I've played a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit later, but for now we're going to go ahead and get things started. So basically when you start the game, you go ahead and choose your save slot, and you're presented with the option for two different difficulty settings, normal and Maniac. Maniac basically means you get hit once you die, and normal is actually pretty hard, so really the difficulties are hard and Maniac. We're going to go ahead with normal because, you know, I'm not a total masochist right now, and I'm not that great at the game. Now, the game doesn't have the best, you know, voice acting. I'll let you hear right here.
Robotic technology have ushered in a new era of peace and prosperity. Violence is confined.
Anyways, it doesn't get any better than that. Luckily, the game does do something right and allows you to skip cutscenes. So going ahead and hitting start on your gamepad will do that. And I do recommend playing with a gamepad. I've tried the keyboard and mouse controls and whatever, and they're pretty terrible. So yeah, I would not recommend. So you start the game off and you're basically greeted with this, which is another little cutscene, but fortunately you can go ahead and skip that as well. Now, a little thing that does annoy me, it's a minor thing, it's only for a split second, for basically the first part of the level, is you can't use your dash move. Basically, if you're not even familiar with Mega Man, basically you run, you can jump, and you can shoot things. There's also a dash move, but it, for some reason, locks you out of being able to use the dash until, you get a little bit further in this stage, and to me that's just a bit annoying because I hate any sort of, we'll say, hand holding, but it's not a huge deal. It's right here. We basically get our ability. So basically the premise of the game is you run around, you shoot things, and what happens is you destabilize robots with your shots, and then you dash through them to sort of absorb their energy. And different robots, you'll notice there's different colors that come up. Right now it's blue. And what happens is, if I recall correctly, let me double check this, yes. Every enemy that is blue, and when you absorb them, it goes towards building up your, right here, Axel Recover. So once you get that fully charged, it kind of operates like an E-Tank in Mega Man games. If you're not familiar with Mega Man, it's basically a spare energy tank, or we'll say a health potion that you can recover your health with. You'll notice that those enemies there were red that I absorbed. And what those did was they gave me that little power-up that's above my head currently, and that allows my shots to go through enemies and hit the enemies on the other side. So there's three different additional color, other colors other than the blue ones, and they are red, green, and yellow. And I've already gone ahead and I've forgotten what each one does. I believe yellow increases your armor so you don't take as much damage, and green allows you to move quicker. So, actually, as you can tell right now, I've absorbed a lot of the blue, we'll say a lot of blue enemies, and as such, my Axel Recover has been fully charged, and you can actually see up in the top left, right below my health bar, there is a recovery, we'll say, circle, indicating that it is ready to go. Now, I'm not doing too well because I'm trying to talk at the same time. Actually, on that note as well, if I were to die, I would basically start back at the beginning of the level or at we'll say the nearest sort of checkpoint within the level. Basically that, that happens if your health runs out. It's typical, we'll say, gameplay fare. I did want to bring that up though because at the bottom, at the very top of the screen, right above my health bar, is the number 9, and that indicates the number of lives I have. I have it set to 9, the default is 2. So in the game's options, you can choose how many lives you have, and I would actually recommend adjusting that rather than choosing a difficulty level, because I find that has a better, we'll say, fine-tune effect on the difficulty of the game than choosing between normal and Maniac. So basically, I had it set for that just, for the purposes of this video. No, I'm not a wimp. No, it doesn't really matter to me what people think, but I just figured I'd mention that. That basically you're going to be wanting to use your lives to actually fine-tune the difficulty to your taste, because, like I said, there's not really a wide variety in that. So anyways, you play through the first stage, and you're greeted with this boss. And it basically works like the other enemies in the game. Basically, you shoot him down until he becomes destabilized, and then you go ahead and absorb him. However, with this boss and all the other bosses in the game, it basically follows the same sort of format. You don't actually defeat them when you dash into them after they become destabilized. It's only after, of course, their health goes all the way down. This can actually be kind of beneficial in that some of the bosses, they might have an attack that's very hard to dodge, and if you can destabilize them around that time and then dash into them, you can interrupt maybe one of their big attacks. So you can use it sort of strategically. Now, one thing you've probably noticed is the graphics are terrible. They are bad. Maybe they're passable because, it was supposed to say independently funded, and I can be okay with that. However, the problem I have with the graphics is not necessarily the fact that they're bad. It's that they're bad and the performance of the game is poor. Now, I'm sorry I've been skipping over cutscenes just in case somebody cares about spoilers. To me, I'm showing off the game, I'm not showing off the story, so that's why I've been sort of just jumping through there. Alright, so once you beat the first stage, you're greeted with this screen, and you can go ahead and choose which level you want to go ahead and play. If you did back the game or purchase the DLC separately, you can get the Vermilion Destroyer. It's a special stage where after beating this stage, you actually get to use this character here, which I believe their name is called Ray or Raychen. And I have a save where I can go ahead and I'll show that off in a little bit. But before we go ahead and do that, I want to go to the options screen. And for the reason why I want to go to that is I wanted to address a couple things. One, I want to show you guys my graphic settings. This is what I'm playing with. High, a little bit of anti-aliasing, but I've turned off bloom and motion blur because, and actually shadow quality. These three tend to have a very drastic effect on performance. And my performance is actually very poor. I have occasional points where it just locks up for a second, and this is not just my system. I do have a poor computer, but this is a commonly reported problem with the game. And at first I was like, okay, my computer's terrible, but then I remembered, the other day, because I was playing, Crisis. I'm able to play Crisis Warhead and Crisis 2 on the top settings without anti-aliasing, admittedly, but on the top settings and getting an average about 30 to 40 frames per second. If I can play Crisis, then I shouldn't have problems with performance with this game here. So, we'll say, asking myself the question, but can I play Crisis? Yeah, there's really no excuse for the poor performance in this game, considering, the faces aren't even animated. The other thing I wanted to bring up here is an option I absolutely love about the game is the option to be able to turn it to a retro background music. You can choose kind of an 8-bit styled soundtrack, and that is, I think, a fantastic addition. However, the default volume levels are pretty terrible in this game, and as you probably noticed, because the voice acting was so drowned out, because I didn't like the voice acting, I had the volume turned right down, and the sound effects turned down, because the default settings, the music's kind of tucked behind everything, and I can barely even hear it. And under other, we can see the lives remaining. I have it set to 9, and the default is 2, but like I said, that's where you actually want to adjust your difficulty setting, especially for our first playthrough. So anyways, we've gone ahead and looked at that. We switched it over to the retro background music so you can kind of get an idea of how that's going to sound. And we're going to go ahead and choose a level. Now, I'm not going to play through everything, obviously. I'm just, like I said, I'm trying to give it's like a show and tell, right? I want to show off the game and talk about it a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and go with Counter Shade. because I know how to actually beat this one. And I think it's kind of a good example of, we'll say, the level design in the game. I find the level design is kind of made up of good ideas, poorly executed. I like this one. It's kind of a non-linear level in that you can kind of, it's one big area that you move through. And it's got, you know, you're constantly interacting with the boss. Counter Shade is always in some part of the level, and he's shooting me, obviously. And you kind of have to hunt him down and get to him and sort of shoot him. And then once you've kind of skirmished with him a little bit, he will finally be ready to go ahead and, you know, take you on in the boss room. So right now you see like the laser showing that he's, you know, aiming from this direction, and here he is hiding behind the door, and he's going to teleport right in front, and we're going to take a couple shots at him, and he disappears. And now listening to using my ears, I can hear that he's aiming at me from the left. So basically you move through the presidential mansion, whatever, and you make your way over to him to basically, well, you know, beat him. I like the idea of this level. It doesn't quite flow properly, but I think it's a cool idea. I like, and it's not always the same thing either. He does change his patterns. So sometimes, you know, he might be on the left-hand side from the start, or he might come at you, might be shooting at you from a different direction. So the level does play out differently each time you play it. And a lot of the enemies will go ahead and respawn. Like I know that right now I'm kind of going through an empty hallway, but the enemies do respawn, and the level does change up as you progress through it. So areas can take on entirely new properties, maybe the second time you're through them. So even though it's an open area that, you know, you're chasing the guy through, and you think there would be some repetition there, there's a bit of a differentiation. Now, I do want to draw attention to these enemies. The cloaked enemies. You notice the ones that are invisible. They give me a second. Focus. Pay attention to them. Notice how easy it is to see them. Okay, see that? We'll be returning to that in just a little bit. All right. Now another thing. Sorry for the quick cut there. Another, we'll say, note is notice anything pink in this game. Avoid it. Pink is the, we'll say, universal sign in this game for insta-death. It is basically the spikes of this game. And so anytime you see anything pink, you do not want to touch it, because that will instantly kill you right away. So, like I said, be careful for that. But yeah, this is basically the sort of the level design in this game. It's basically they kind of follow these sort of, well, actually no, that's not fair. We'll show at least one more level to kind of give you a better idea, because they're not all this open-ended. You know, you do have your linear levels and all that. Now, another thing, I mentioned defeating enemies, you could do it just by, you know, shooting them and then dashing through them. However, it is also possible to defeat them just by completely just shooting at the enemy and until they are dead. Now, that is maybe not, it's not desirable, because, you know, when you do that, you don't get your, we'll say, the bonus score. So, you know, you can do it if it's maybe better for you, but ultimately you don't want to be doing that if you're really going for the high score. Now, all my complaints about the levels design aside, I do find that the levels are set up in such a way that you can move through them quickly once you've learned them. Have I learned them? No, I'm not that good at it quite yet, but I do kind of like it. So anyways, as you can see right here, he sort of ricochets shots, but he has these little sort of orbs that he kind of bounces shots off of. So as they're going through the level, you want to kind of be wary of these orbs, because they can go ahead and redirect shots directly at you. And here we have an example of sort of the level changing. You know, as you come and revisit them. I went back into the main room because that's where he had led me, but he was up on top of a chandelier and I couldn't get to him from where he was. But yeah, as you notice, you know, that time there were those cables that, you know, basically had the pink electricity on them, and that made it so that it was, you know, harder to go ahead and we'll say actually get to him and actually, we'll say, kill him. Now at this point, Counter Shade's going to be like, all right, now it's time we settle this like robots, and now we actually move on to the boss fight. Now, this is actually going to bring up a point. I have found some several bugs in this game. In one of the stages, I was hit while climbing a ladder, and as a result, all collision detection with Beck, the main character here, and certain types of floor were not detected, so I was falling through these floors all the time. Now this part, now I'm not sure if this was intentional, but I actually use a bug as sort of an exploit to defeat Counter Shade. Okay, we're skipping this cutscene, come on. I'll show you that in just a second here. So I'm gonna stay here, I'll shoot him. But what happens is I've noticed that these bottom two, we'll say red walls, I guess you will call them, they tend to have their boundaries a little ill-defined, because I can shoot Counter Shade through the wall. And I don't know if that's intended or if that's just a bug, but it is something I definitely exploit to be able to beat him. So basically, I found he was actually the easiest boss to beat, which is why I've decided to sort of focus on him. But what happens is, once you beat the boss, and you will see this in just a little bit, you get to sort of collect their powers like Mega Man, and that's actually pretty well implemented. And I actually have to give credit that I do find the boss battles to be fairly entertaining. All of the bosses I've fought have been very challenging, but I found they were actually very good, and they're probably the highlight of an otherwise rather mediocre game. Now, you know, I do enjoy the game. I do find it's good, but like I said, let's make no, we'll say, question about it. It is a very deeply flawed game. Now, one thing I do find interesting is that, unlike the Mega Man games, when you defeat a boss, you don't actually kill them. And what happens, I've found, is that when you choose another level, is sometimes that boss will come and change that level for you. So, for example, and I hope I'm not spoiling anything here as far as boss order goes. After I beat Counter Shade, I like to go after, what's his name? Avi? Basically, it's a sky level. And during one part of the level, there's, we'll say, a fight that you have, but Counter Shade will actually come in and interrupt that fight and actually basically give you a free pass through it. And there's a few other little parts where bosses you've defeated will actually change elements in other levels, and I think that's kind of cool. It's kind of calls back to Mega Man X, but it also, I feel like it kind of gives you a clue as to which boss is effective against another boss. So, like for example, Counter Shade, if I go ahead and decide to go to the, where is it? The radio tower, Aviator. When I go up against Mighty number 6, Counter Shade shows up, and his weapon also happens to be the weakness for Mighty number 6. So it kind of gives you a bit of a hint before you even get to the boss, you know, whose weapon is probably most effective against him. Now, before we go ahead and do this, I did want to point out something. I'm going to be making another sort of quick cut here, but I want to show something. Let's go ahead and change, we'll say, effect quality down to, let's say, mid. We're gonna change the graphics settings here, and we will be actually right back. All right, so we're back on Counter Shade's level, and actually, sorry, it's not mid. It's actually on low. I've actually turned all the settings down to the lowest they could possibly be. Now, remember those enemies that we could kind of see before with the sort of shimmering effect? You'll notice now that they are completely invisible. I'm sorry, I had gotten the exact, we'll say, graphics settings wrong, but basically if you want to improve, we'll say, performance of the game, I believe it might have been texture quality rather than effect, I'm sorry, but basically I turned everything down to the lowest. You'll notice that the enemy is completely invisible. You cannot see it, but if I try dashing, he will hit me. I am not a big fan of when games, we'll say, your actual experience of the game to the graphics. If the graphics being too low impedes your performance, your ability to play the game, then I think that is a problem with the game. I just wanted to go ahead and show that off. But yeah, like I said, there's actually not a whole lot of we'll say graphical increase when going up to a higher setting. But yeah, when I put everything down to low, these settings right here, so it does appear it's probably texture quality that's the big culprit here. Maybe it's shadow. I'm not exactly sure what setting it's tied to. But if you're going to be playing on lower settings for better performance, please be aware that it will affect what enemies you can even see and how you can react to things. So that is a bit of a problem. Okay, we're gonna jump over to my other save because I want to show off the DLC character, because I actually feel like it's an interesting way to play the game. So I'm gonna go ahead over here. Now, one note: if you are playing the DRM free version, which I am, I had gotten it from as a result of being a Kickstarter, but it was given to me through the Humble Store. If you are playing the DRM free version, you need to launch the game in administrator mode. If you do not, the game will act like it saves, but won't actually save your game. So that's probably why it says I've only played 36 minutes, is because I've actually had to replay several parts of the game and beat several bosses multiple times before I was able to actually even save my game. So do keep that in mind. That is another technical problem with the game. Now, if you like tough as nails challenges, what you can do is go ahead and switch over to a character known as Ray, or Ray-chan. It's kind of like a cross between Proto Man and Zero from the Mega Man and Mega Man X series. Alright, so after you've gone ahead and you've beat the Vermilion Destroyer level, it's this level right here, and we'll go ahead and show that off because there's probably some spoilers if you're interested in the story. You go ahead and you unlock the new character, which the game doesn't really explain how you can change. So you push up on your stick or your D-pad and you can switch between Beck and Ray. Ray is sort of a Proto Man Zero kind of hybrid from, you know, the Mega Man and Mega Man X series. Ray has, I believe it's her actually. Ray has her own levels, so if you've beaten a level as Beck, you will need to, we'll say, beat it again as Ray. It counts separately. It's like two different, we'll say, lines of playing with their own story. But like I said, we're going to be skipping over all story elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we'll say maybe to the power plant with Ray. And I want to show off the gameplay of this, because if you like hard as nails challenges, this is actually, I think it's I actually think that this DLC should have been part of the core game. Basically what happens is you are completely a melee character, and rather than sort of shooting to disable enemies, you know, like destabilize them and then damage them, or we'll say absorb them, you basically are just hacking and slashing everything into pieces. However, you'll notice your health is steadily kind of decreasing. Well, kind of decreasing. It's basically like, you know, in a fighting game where you would have, we'll say, the red part of your health, where you can go ahead and recover that over time. Your health is constantly sort of decreasing. It kind of has a temporary decrease. And what happens is, if you are hit by an enemy, then you actually lose that amount of health. So the longer you wait between killing an enemy, the more damage you will take if you are hit by an enemy. And I think that actually adds a very, we'll say, big challenge to the game. Now, it's kind of nice that Ray's, we'll say, dash can actually damage and kill enemies. So your movement is a little bit less restricted, especially by, we'll say, like, enemies that are in the air that might be directly in your path, because you can basically sort of dash through them. But like I said, overall, I feel like this game mode, especially the way the health works, is very challenging, and it's very cool. And with as many problems that are with the game, I actually feel like the fact that this DLC character and this sort of gameplay was not included by default to be kind of insulting, kind of annoying. However, that is, like I said, that is a personal issue, and that's the way I feel. The game itself is actually not that expensive, so I suppose that maybe my thoughts are unjustified. Maybe they're being colored by the fact that I'm not pleased with the performance of the game. But like I said, all in all, I do feel that the DLC adds something to the game. It's not just basically we'll say a color swap of Beck. It's a completely unique way to play the game, and it's especially there if you're somebody who enjoys a challenge. So as you can see right there, my health really took a hit, and now it's at the point where if I get hit like once, I'm dead. Notice those big pink turbines. You touch those and you will die. And that's actually an example I feel of, we'll say, some of the poorer level design in the game. See this big turbine? Yeah. There's a part later on in this level where where you do that, where you basically just die because you're stupid. No, there's a part where you have to do a low dash. Now the game does not explain to you how to do a low dash. It basically just sort of says do a dash move. And you know, you've been doing the dash throughout the entire game, right? So you're thinking, okay, I'll just go ahead and dash through, you know, a la Mega Man, right? Because you know, like the little ski slide and all that stuff. Yeah, no problem. The thing is, no, you need to actually hold down and hit dash, or else you will die. So there's a low dash and there's a normal dash. And this is actually the only instance of this required low dash that I have found so far in the game. So it's kind of weird that it's got such a limited use, but it's also tied to a one-hit death. So this part is very, we'll say, nerve-wracking. Let me see here. I'll show you that one part because it does kind of, we'll say, accentuate the problem I have with the level design in this game. The levels are very hit and miss. They're like cool and then they're not cool. You know, it's like some of them are cool, they're not. Now you have to get really close because you got to make sure your dash gets you all the way through to the side, and then you do your low dash. And I'm very close to just dying. So as you can see, this is a real pace breaker. I'm sure, you know, some speedrunner will get very quick at it, and it won't be a problem, but to me, that was a poorly designed part of the level. So anyways, you know, I feel like I've kind of shown off and said everything I want to say about Mighty Number 9. I did a video on the demo that was released to the backers a little while ago, and I don't feel like the game has really changed a whole lot. There are definitely some, we'll say, disappointing aspects to the game, but it's far from, we'll say, the hellspawn that people make it out to be. There's actually a lot to enjoy here, and we'll say its technical issues aside, it's a pretty decent game. I just wish that maybe it was a little bit more polished, and considering how many, we'll say, setbacks the game had for being released, you know, that's very disappointing that it's not more polished than it is. So, yeah, this has been basically my sort of quick look at Mighty Number 9. And basically here we have another boss, which actually I kind of like the way this one plays. I'm not very good at it right now, but I like I said, I like the bosses in this game. So anyways, if you like this content and would like to see more, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, go ahead and leave it a thumbs down. Either way, let me know what you thought in the comment section. And, you know, until next time, I'd like to ask you all to game on.